The thunderous crack of gunfire echoed across Sierra City, California, as Violet Barrymore pressed her back against the rough wall of the general store, her heart pounding in her chest. It was 1872, and the small mining town nestled in the Sierra Nevada mountains was supposed to be her sanctuary, not another nightmare. Her trembling fingers clutched the worn fabric of her once fine dress, now hanging loose on her gaunt frame after weeks of near starvation. That's enough. A deep voice cut through the commotion of the street. "Put that gun down before I put a bullet between your eyes, Carson." Violet peered around the corner to see a tall man astride a magnificent black stallion, his broad shoulders squared beneath a dusty leather vest, his face partially hidden by the shadow of his hat. Hunter Lawson was notorious throughout Sierra County, a hard man with a harder reputation, feared by outlaws and townsfolk alike. The would-be gunslinger, barely old enough to grow a proper beard, lowered his pistol. "Didn't mean nothing by it, Lawson, just celebrating a little." "Celebrate without the gunplay, or celebrate from a pine box. Your choice." Hunter's voice was like gravel, leaving no room for argument. Violet had heard the stories about Hunter Lawson since arriving in Sierra City 3 weeks prior. Former cavalry scout, bounty hunter, ranch owner, the tales varied, but all agreed on one thing. He was a man best avoided, especially by a woman with secrets like hers. She waited until Hunter had ridden further down the street before attempting to make her way back to the tiny room she rented above the laundry. The world tilted suddenly, black spots dancing before her eyes. It had been 2 days since her last proper meal, a crust of bread and thin soup provided by Mrs. Jenkins out of pity. The meager funds she'd arrived with had dwindled to nothing, and pride kept her from begging outright. Violet took another step, but her knees buckled. The dusty street rushed up to meet her, but instead of the hard impact she expected, strong arms caught her. Through the haze of near unconsciousness, she looked up into the stern face of Hunter Lawson, his steel blue eyes widening with something like surprise as he felt how little she weighed in his arms. "Miss." His voice seemed to come from far away. "Miss, can you hear me?" She tried to respond, to assure him she was fine, but darkness claimed her before she could form the words. Hunter had dismounted the moment he saw the woman begin to sway. Pure instinct drove him to her side just as she collapsed. Now, with her limp form cradled against his chest, he was struck by how light she felt, like holding a bird with hollow bones. Her cheekbones stood out sharply against pale skin, and even through the fabric of her dress, he could feel her ribs. "Someone fetch Doc Parker." He shouted, drawing the attention of onlookers who had gathered at a cautious distance. Hunter Lawson rarely involved himself in the affairs of others, and certainly never with such urgency in his voice. Gently, he lifted Violet fully into his arms and carried her toward the doctor's office at the end of the street, his mind racing. He'd seen starvation before during the war in prison camps, on desperate cattle drives gone wrong. This woman hadn't eaten properly in weeks, if he was any judge, doctor. Parker was waiting at his door, alerted by a young boy Hunter had sent running ahead. "Bring her in, quick," the elderly physician said, holding the door wide. Hunter laid Violet on the examination table with more care than he'd shown anything in years. Found her collapsing in the street. "She's half-starved, Doc." The doctor nodded grimly, his practiced hands already checking her pulse. "I know this young lady, Miss Barrymore, came to town about 3 weeks ago looking for work. Quiet sort, keeps to herself." He lifted one of her eyelids gently. "Definitely malnourished. Dehydrated too, I'd wager." Hunter stepped back, hat in hand, unsure why he felt so invested in the fate of this stranger. "She going to be all right," Dr. Parker sighed. "With proper care, yes, food, water, rest, all things that cost money, which I suspect is precisely what she's lacking." He glanced at Hunter with knowing eyes. Unless someone might be willing to help. Hunter's jaw tightened. He'd built his reputation on being hard, untouchable. The last thing he needed was to get tangled in some woman's troubles. But the image of her feather-light body in his arms refused to leave him. "I'll cover her expenses," he said gruffly, "and find out what her situation is." The doctor's eyebrows shot up in surprise, but he wisely kept any comments to himself. She'll need to stay here tonight. I'll give her some broth when she wakes, but she'll need careful feeding for several days. Too much too soon could do more harm than good." Hunter nodded, placing his hat back on his head. "I'll return in the morning to check on her." As he turned to leave, the woman stirred slightly on the table, her cracked lips forming a word too soft to hear. Hunter paused, taking a step closer. "Thank you," she whispered, her eyes fluttering open briefly before closing again. Something shifted inside Hunter's chest, a sensation so foreign he almost didn't recognize it. Concern. It had been years since he'd allowed himself to feel anything for anyone. Emotions were weakness, and weakness got you killed out here. Yet somehow, this half-starved woman had cracked his carefully constructed armor with just 2 whispered words. "Rest," he said, his voice gentler than anyone in Sierra City would have believed possible. "Just rest now." As Hunter stepped out into the fading sunlight, he wondered what the hell he'd just gotten himself into. Violet awakened to the unfamiliar sensation of a soft pillow beneath her head and the smell of medicines and soap. Her eyes adjusted slowly to the dim light of an oil lamp burning low on a nearby table. This wasn't her sparse room above the laundry. "Good evening," said a kindly voice. "Welcome back to the land of the living." She turned her head to see Dr. Parker sitting in a chair beside the bed, a book open on his lap. The events leading to her current situation came flooding back, bringing with them a wave of humiliation. "I fainted," she said, her voice hoarse. "Indeed you did, young lady, straight into the arms of Hunter Lawson, of all people." The doctor closed his book and leaned forward. "You're suffering from malnutrition and exhaustion. When was the last time you ate a proper meal?" Violet averted her eyes. "I've been economizing. Starving yourself is more like it." The doctor's voice was stern but not unkind. "Here, try to drink this." He helped her sit up slightly and held a cup of broth to her lips. The warm liquid was the most delicious thing Violet had tasted in weeks. She had to force herself not to gulp it down. "Slowly," Dr. Parker cautioned. "Your stomach will reject anything taken too quickly." After finishing the broth, Violet found her voice again. "I'm sorry to be a burden. I have no way to pay you, but once I find work, Mr. Lawson has seen to your bill," the doctor interrupted. Violet's eyes widened. "The man who caught me, why would he do that?" Dr. Parker shrugged. "That, Miss Barrymore, is a question that has the whole town buzzing. Hunter Lawson isn't known for charitable acts, yet he carried you here himself and insisted on covering all expenses for your care." Violet sank back against the pillows, utterly confused. Everything she'd heard about Hunter Lawson painted him as cold, dangerous, a man who'd sooner shoot you than look at you. "He'll be back in the morning," Dr. Parker added, standing up. "Said he wanted to talk to you when you were feeling stronger. I suggest you get some more rest before then." Sleep came surprisingly easy, despite the turmoil in Violet's mind. Her body, finally receiving nourishment and proper rest, surrendered quickly to exhaustion. Morning arrived with golden light streaming through the windows and the distant sounds of Sierra City coming to life. Violet was sitting up in bed, managing small spoonfuls of porridge, when a knock sounded at the door. Dr. Parker opened it to reveal Hunter Lawson, looking even more imposing in daylight than he had in Violet's hazy memories. He filled the doorframe with his broad shoulders, hat in hand, revealing dark hair streaked with premature silver at the temples. His face was weathered and tanned, with lines that spoke of hard living and harder decisions. But it was his eyes that caught Violet's attention, blue as a mountain lake, and currently assessing her with unsettling intensity. "Miss Barrymore is awake and improving," Dr. Parker announced unnecessarily. "I'll give you two some privacy to talk." With that, he slipped out, closing the door behind him. Hunter remained standing awkwardly just inside the room, as if uncertain of his welcome. "Madam," he finally said with a slight nod. "How are you feeling?" "Better, thank you." Violet set aside her half-finished porridge. "Doctor Parker tells me I have you to thank for my care. I'm deeply grateful, Mr. Lawson, though I don't understand why you'd help a stranger." A muscle twitched in Hunter's jaw. "Couldn't very well leave you in the street." "Many would have," she countered softly. Hunter moved further into the room, his spurs jingling slightly with each step. "Doc says you're suffering from starvation. Been in town 3 weeks. What's your story, Miss Barrymore? The directness of his question caught Violet off guard. In her experience, men spoke to women with either flowery compliments or condescending instructions. Hunter Lawson, it seemed, had no time for either approach. I came here looking for work, she answered carefully. The position I'd been promised fell through. I've been trying to find another, but… She gestured helplessly. Sierra City's not exactly bursting with opportunities for a lady, Hunter finished for her. Violet nodded, fighting back a wave of despair. I've tried the hotel, the restaurant, even offered to teach the children, but the town already has a school teacher. Where'd you come from before here? Violet hesitated. How much should she reveal? San Francisco, she finally said, the truth but not the whole truth. Hunter studied her face, and Violet had the distinct impression he saw more than she wished to show. Running from something or someone, she stiffened. I don't see how that's relevant to my current situation. A hint of what might have been amusement flickered across his stern features. It's relevant if whatever you're running from follows you here. It won't, she said with more confidence than she felt. San Francisco is behind me now. Hunter seemed to accept this, at least temporarily. What skills do you have, besides teaching, that is? Violet considered the question. I can read and write well. I know arithmetic and bookkeeping. I play piano, though I doubt that's much use here. I can sew, though not well enough for professional work. Can you cook? Yes, quite well actually. My mother insisted I learn despite our… She stopped herself. Yes, I can cook. Hunter nodded as if coming to a decision. I've got a proposition for you, Miss Barrymore. Violet tensed. She'd heard propositions from men before, especially since finding herself alone in the world. But something in Hunter's straightforward gaze reassured her that his offer wouldn't be of the indecent variety. I own a ranch about 5 miles outside of town, he continued. Lost my cook 2 months back when old Gus decided gold mining was his true calling. A flash of annoyance crossed his face. Got 4 ranch hands living in the bunkhouse, plus myself in the main house. We've been making do, but frankly, none of us can cook worth a damn. Violet's heart quickened with hope. You're offering me a position as your cook. Room and board plus $20 a month, Hunter said. You'd have your own quarters, a small cabin just behind the main house. Used to be for the housekeeper before. He trailed off. It's yours if you want it, once Doc says you're strong enough to travel. The offer was unexpected and almost too perfect. A position away from town, with lodging included and a decent wage. Yet Violet couldn't help but hesitate. Hunter Lawson might not be the monster some made him out to be, but he was still an unknown quantity, a harsh man by all accounts. Seeing her hesitation, Hunter added, Mrs. Whittaker from town comes out twice a week to help with laundry and such. You'd not be the only woman on the property. This reassurance, along with the growl of her empty stomach, made Violet's decision easier. I accept your offer, Mr. Lawson, with gratitude. When could I start? Doc says you need at least 3 days of proper feeding before you should travel, even the short distance to the ranch. I'll come for you on Friday morning. Hunter placed his hat back on his head. Rest up, Miss Barrymore. Ranch life starts early. With that, he turned and left, the sound of his boots fading down the hallway. Dr. Parker returned moments later, a knowing smile on his face. I see you've had an employment offer. Yes, Violet confirmed, still somewhat dazed by the turn of events. I'm to be Mr. Lawson's cook. The doctor nodded approvingly. Hunter's ranch is one of the most successful in the county. He works his men hard but pays fair. The fresh air and good food will do you a world of good. He paused, his expression growing more serious. Whatever you're running from, my dear, you could do worse than having Hunter Lawson between it and you. Violet stared at him in surprise. Is it that obvious? Only to someone who's seen enough frightened people in his time, the doctor said kindly. Your secret is safe with me. Now, let's see about getting some more food into you. Can't have Hunter's new cook looking like a strong wind might blow her away. The next 3 days passed in a blur of naps, small but increasingly substantial meals, and visits from curious townsfolk who'd heard about Hunter Lawson's unexpected act of charity. Violet deflected their questions as politely as possible, focusing instead on gathering her strength for the new position. By Friday morning, Though still thinner than was fashionable, Violet felt more alive than she had in weeks. Doctor. Parker had provided her with a tonic to continue taking, and the wife of the local minister had kindly donated a serviceable dress that fitted Violet's diminished frame better than her own clothing. Hunter arrived precisely at 9 o'clock, driving a wagon rather than riding his stallion. He nodded a greeting to Violet, who stood waiting on the doctor's porch with her small carpet bag containing the sum total of her worldly possessions. "Miss Barrymore," he said, offering a hand to help her up onto the wagon seat. His grip was firm but careful, as if he still feared she might break. "Mr. Lawson," she replied, settling her skirts around her. "I'm ready whenever you are." The journey to Hunter's ranch took them out of Sierra City and into the stunning countryside beyond. Spring had painted the meadows with wildflowers, and the distant mountains stood like sentinels against the clear blue sky. Violet breathed deeply, savoring the fresh air after weeks of feeling trapped. Hunter was quiet for much of the journey, but not uncomfortably so. Occasionally, he would point out a landmark or name a distant peak. Violet found herself studying his profile when he wasn't looking, the strong line of his jaw, partially hidden by several days' growth of beard, the tiny scar near his right temple, the way his eyes narrowed slightly when he scanned the horizon, a habit likely formed during his scouting days. "It's beautiful country," she ventured as they crossed a small stream, the horses splashing through the crystal clear water. "It is," Hunter agreed, something in his tone softening. "First saw it during the war, promised myself I'd come back if I survived." He glanced at her. "You get used to making bargains like that in wartime." Violet nodded, understanding all too well the need to make promises to oneself in dark times. "And you kept your promise." "One of the few," he said cryptically, then fell silent again. They crested a small rise and Hunter pulled the wagon to a stop. "There it is," he said, gesturing ahead. "Lawson Ranch." Violet gasped softly at the vista below them. The ranch spread across a verdant valley nestled between protective hills. A large main house of sturdy logs and stone dominated the property, with a bunkhouse, barn, stables, and various outbuildings clustered nearby. A corral held several horses, and in the distance, cattle grazed peacefully. A small creek wound through the property, lined with cottonwoods and willows. "It's lovely," she said honestly. "How long have you been here?" "Bought the land right after the war in '65, Hunter replied, a note of pride evident beneath his usual gruffness. "Built most of it myself with help from the men. Started with just the cabin, what'll be your quarters now, and 20 head of cattle." He clicked to the horses, setting them in motion down the slope. "Now we're up to nearly 500 head, plus about 30 horses I breed and train." As they approached the main house, a tall, lanky man emerged from the barn, followed by a younger, stockier fellow. Both watched the wagon's approach with undisguised curiosity. "That's Thomas Neal, my foreman," Hunter explained, "and Joey Fitzgerald, newest hand. The other two, Marcus and Davy, are probably out checking the north pasture." Hunter pulled the wagon to a stop in front of the main house and jumped down, coming around to help Violet descend. She was conscious of the men's eyes on her as Hunter made brief introductions. "Miss Barrymore's our new cook," Hunter informed them. "I expect you'll show her the same respect you'd show your own mother's." Thomas, the foreman, tipped his hat politely. "Madam, welcome to Lawson Ranch. We're mighty pleased to have someone who actually knows their way around a kitchen." Joey, who couldn't have been more than 20, blushed slightly and mumbled a greeting. "I'll show you to your quarters," Hunter said, retrieving Violet's bag from the wagon. "Then give you a tour of the main house and kitchen." The cabin that was to be Violet's home was indeed small, but far more comfortable than she'd expected. It contained a modest bedroom with a real bed, complete with a colorful quilt, a sitting area with a small stove for heat, and a tiny washroom. Windows on 3 sides let in ample light, and someone had placed a vase of wildflowers on the small table. "Mrs. Whittaker fixed it up when I told her you'd be coming," Hunter explained, noticing Violet's surprise at the homey touches. "Said no decent woman would want to live in a place as Spartan as men would tolerate. It's perfect," Violet assured him, genuinely pleased with the accommodation. Far better than what I've had recently. Hunter's expression darkened momentarily at the reminder of her previous circumstances. Well, there's plenty of food now and no need to economize, as you put it. He set her bag down on a chair. I'll let you get settled. Main house is just up the path when you're ready for that tour. Left alone, Violet took a moment to simply breathe. The cabin smelled of fresh soap and pine, with a hint of the wildflowers. After weeks of uncertainty and fear, she finally had a safe place to lay her head, honest work to do, and the promise of regular meals. It was more than she'd dared hope for when she'd fled San Francisco with nothing but the clothes on her back and a few precious mementos. She unpacked her meager belongings. 2 dresses besides the one she wore, a nightgown, undergarments, a hairbrush, and a small wooden box containing her mother's locket and her father's pocket watch. Hidden in the lining of her carpetbag was the newspaper clipping that had driven her to flee a report of Gerald Blackwood's engagement to the daughter of a shipping magnate, with a photograph of the handsome couple. The sight of his face still made her stomach clench with a mixture of fear and anger. Violet tucked the clipping back into its hiding place. That life was behind her now. Here, she was simply Violet Barrymore, cook for the Lawson Ranch. No one needed to know she'd once been Violet Barrymore, almost fiancée to one of San Francisco's most eligible, and as she discovered too late, most dangerous bachelors. With renewed determination, Violet splashed water on her face from the basin provided, smoothed her hair, and set out for the main house to begin her new life. The main house was rustic but well built, with a large central room that served as both dining area and gathering space, complete with a massive stone fireplace. The kitchen was spacious by frontier standards, with a good-sized stove, ample counters, and a pantry stocked with basic provisions. Violet ran her hand appreciatively over the solid wooden work table that dominated the center of the room. Previous owner was married, Hunter explained as he showed her around. Had the place built with a proper kitchen. Meals are at 6 in the morning, noon, and 6 in the evening. Men come in from the bunkhouse to eat at the main table there. He gestured to the large table in the dining area. I usually eat with them, unless I've got paperwork or such. And what sorts of meals do your men prefer? Violet asked, already mentally inventorying the pantry contents and planning menus. A hint of a smile crossed Hunter's face. After months of our own cooking, Miss Barrymore, anything that doesn't stick to the pot or come out raw in the middle will be welcomed like manna from heaven. Violet couldn't help but smile in return. I'll aim somewhat higher than that, Mr. Lawson. Their eyes met for a moment, and something indefinable passed between them, a spark of connection neither had anticipated. Hunter broke the contact first, clearing his throat. Right, well. I've got work to attend to. Make yourself at home. Dinner's at 6, as I said. If you need anything before then, I'll be in my office there. He pointed to a door off the main room. Left to her own devices, Violet spent the afternoon familiarizing herself with the kitchen and planning the evening meal. The pantry was stocked with staples: flour, sugar, coffee, beans, rice, and canned goods, while a cold storage room off the back porch held bacon, a ham, and some beef. A small kitchen garden provided onions, carrots, and early greens. By the time 6 o'clock approached, delicious aromas filled the main house. Violet had prepared a hearty beef stew with dumplings, cornbread, and an apple cobbler made from preserved apples she'd found in the pantry. It was simple fare, but well seasoned, and prepared with care, the kind of meal working men would appreciate. The ranch hands arrived with the punctuality of men accustomed to hard work and regular meals. Marcus and Davy, whom Violet was meeting for the first time, were as curious about her as the others had been. But all were polite and appreciative as they washed up at the pump outside before coming to the table. Hunter emerged from his office, and Violet noticed he'd shaved and changed his shirt. For some reason, this small concession to civilization in her honor touched her more deeply than any words of welcome could have. The meal was a success, with the men eating heartily and praising her cooking with genuine enthusiasm. Violet, still building her strength, ate modestly but savored each bite. Hunter said little during the meal, but she caught him watching her several times with an expression she couldn't quite decipher. After dinner, the men thanked her again and retreated to the bunkhouse, leaving Violet to clean up. She had just begun washing the dishes when Hunter appeared beside her, rolling up his sleeves. "You cook, I'll clean," he said, reaching for a towel. "That's how it worked with old Gus, and I see no reason to change it." Violet paused, surprised by the offer. "That's very kind, Mr. Lawson, but unnecessary. Cleaning up is part of my duties." "Not on this ranch," Hunter insisted. "Cook provides the meal, others clean up after. Seems fair to me." They worked side by side in comfortable silence, Violet washing while Hunter dried and put things away. She was intensely aware of his presence, the way his forearms flexed as he worked, the clean scent of soap that had replaced the day's dust, the careful way he handled her cooking implements. "The men enjoyed your cooking," Hunter finally said, breaking the silence. "Been a while since I've seen them eat with such appreciation." "I'm glad," Violet replied, smiling. "It's gratifying to cook for people who enjoy food, and I needed that meal as much as any of them." Hunter's expression sobered. "You won't go hungry here, Miss Barrymore, I promise you that." The sincerity in his voice brought unexpected tears to Violet's eyes. She blinked them away quickly, focusing on scrubbing a particularly stubborn pot. "Thank you, Mr. Lawson, for everything." "Hunter," he said suddenly. "My name's Hunter. No need to be so formal here." Violet looked up, meeting his gaze. "Then you must call me Violet." Something shifted in Hunter's eyes, a softening, a warmth that transformed his entire face. "Violet," he repeated, as if testing the feel of her name on his tongue. "It suits you." The moment stretched between them, filled with unspoken possibilities, until Hunter cleared his throat and hung the towel to dry. "Well, I've got accounts to finish before turning in. Breakfast at 6. "I'll be ready," she assured him, wondering at the strange flutter in her chest as he walked away. That night, in her small but comfortable bed, Violet fell asleep more peacefully than she had in months, lulled by the gentle sounds of the countryside and the knowledge that, for the first time in a long while, she was truly safe. The next few weeks established a rhythm to life at Lawson Ranch. Violet rose before dawn each day to prepare breakfast for the men, usually hearty fare of eggs, bacon, biscuits, and coffee to fuel their long workdays. Lunches were often packed for those working far afield, while dinners brought everyone together around the large table, sharing the day's events over Violet's increasingly confident cooking. As her strength returned, so did her natural vitality. The fresh air and wholesome food put color back in her cheeks and filled out her too thin frame. Her dresses, once hanging loosely, began to fit properly again. The men of the ranch noticed the change in her, treating her with a blend of respect and protective admiration that warmed her heart. But it was Hunter's attention that affected her most deeply. He rarely spoke at length, but she often caught him watching her when he thought she wasn't looking. There was hunger in his gaze that had nothing to do with food, and it awakened feelings in Violet she thought died with her disillusionment in San Francisco. Hunter, for his part, found himself increasingly drawn to his new cook. He'd hired her out of a mixture of pity and practicality, never expecting her to become a fixture in his thoughts. Yet each morning, his first conscious desire was to see her moving about his kitchen, humming softly as she worked. Each night, his last thoughts were of her smile, the way light caught in her auburn hair, or the grace with which she managed his household. It unsettled him, this growing preoccupation. Hunter had spent years building walls around himself, focusing solely on his ranch and his responsibilities to his men. Women were an occasional diversion in town, nothing more. But Violet was different. She was under his protection, in his home. And she carried secrets he could sense but couldn't name, shadows that sometimes darkened her eyes when she thought no one was watching. One evening, about a month after Violet's arrival, Hunter found himself alone with her on the front porch of the main house. The men had retired to the bunkhouse, and a comfortable silence stretched between them as they watched fireflies dance in the gathering dusk. "You're looking well," Hunter said, glancing at her profile. "Ranch life seems to agree with you." Violet smiled, her hands folded in her lap. "It does. I never imagined I'd find such peace here. When I first came to Sierra City, I was..." She hesitated, desperate. Hunter supplied gently. She nodded. Yes, desperate and afraid. She looked at him directly. You saved my life that day, Hunter. I don't think I've properly thanked you for that. No thanks needed, he said gruffly, uncomfortable with gratitude. Anyone would have done the same. No, Violet insisted softly. Not anyone. Most would have left me to my fate or worse. She shuddered slightly, and Hunter knew she was speaking from experience. What happened in San Francisco, Violet? He asked, the question that had hovered between them for weeks finally spoken aloud. What drove you to flee with nothing but the clothes on your back? Violet stared out at the darkening landscape, weighing how much to reveal. Hunter deserved some truth, she decided. He had earned that much. I was engaged to be married, she began, her voice barely above a whisper. Or nearly so. Gerald Blackwood, son of James Blackwood, the shipping magnate, he was charming, handsome, from one of the city's finest families. After my parents died in a ferry accident, I was alone in the world with little means of support. Gerald's attention seemed like salvation. Hunter remained silent, sensing she needed to tell this story in her own way. At first, he was everything a young woman could dream of, attentive, generous kind. My friends envied me. Violet's hands tightened in her lap. But then I began to notice things, the way his temper flared over small matters. How he needed to control every aspect of my life, my clothes, my friends, my schedule. When I expressed any independence, he would. She swallowed hard. He never struck me in public, always where the bruises wouldn't show. Hunter's jaw clenched, his hands curling into fists at his sides. Bastard, he muttered. I tried to break the engagement, Violet continued. That's when I learned how powerful the Blackwoods truly were. Gerald threatened to ruin me completely, to spread rumors that would make me unmarriageable, unemployable. And I believed him. He had the connections to do it. So you ran, Hunter concluded. Understanding dawning, Violet nodded. I took what little money I had saved, along with my mother's locket and my father's watch, and fled in the night. I had a distant acquaintance in Sierra City who'd once mentioned needing help in her dress shop. But when I arrived, she'd closed the shop and moved on, Hunter finished for her, recalling their earlier conversation. Yes, I spent what little I had on that tiny room searching desperately for work, but no one was hiring and my funds dwindled until… She gestured helplessly. Until you found me half-conscious in the street. Hunter was silent for a long moment, processing her story. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and dangerous. If this Blackwood ever shows his face around here, he'll wish he hadn't. The fierce protectiveness in his tone sent a shiver through Violet, not of fear, but of something warmer, more complex. He won't come looking for me, she said with more confidence than she felt. The papers announced his engagement to a banker's daughter shortly after I fled. I'm sure he's forgotten all about me. Hunter looked unconvinced but didn't argue the point. Instead, he moved his chair slightly closer to hers. You're safe here, Violet. I want you to know that. I do know it, she replied, surprised by how true the words felt. For the first time in a very long while, I feel truly safe. Their eyes met in the fading light, and Hunter reached out tentatively to cover her hand with his. His palm was warm and calloused from years of ranch work, but his touch was gentle, almost reverent. Violet felt her heart quicken but didn't pull away. Thank you for telling me, he said quietly. I know it wasn't easy. Somehow, with you, it was easier than I expected, she admitted. You don't judge. Hunter's mouth quirked in a rare half-smile. I've made too many mistakes of my own to judge anyone else. They sat in companionable silence until full darkness fell, hands still touching, neither willing to break the fragile connection that had formed between them. Summer bloomed across the Sierra Nevada, bringing long, warm days and the steady rhythm of ranch work. Cattle needed moving to higher pastures, fences required mending, and horses demanded training. Hunter was often gone from dawn until dusk, returning to the main house dusty and tired but visibly content with the day's accomplishments. Violet settled more deeply into her role, expanding beyond mere cooking to help Mrs. Whittaker with household management. She planted an expanded kitchen garden, putting to use knowledge gleaned from books she borrowed from Hunter's surprisingly extensive library. The men teased her gently about her fancy vegetables, but cleaned their plates of whatever she served, including the previously suspicious green things. She and Hunter continued their evening conversations on the porch, weather permitting. These quiet moments became precious to them, both a time when masks could be set aside and truths shared. Hunter spoke of his childhood in Missouri, his service as a cavalry scout during the war, the nightmares that sometimes still haunted him. Violet told him of her parents, her education at a modest but respectable girls' school, her love of music and books. What remained unspoken was the growing attraction between them. It lived in lingering glances, in the brush of hands when passing dishes at dinner, in the way Hunter's voice softened when speaking her name. Neither seemed willing to acknowledge it directly, as if naming it might somehow break the spell of their comfortable companionship. The men noticed, of course. Ranch hands missed little, especially when it concerned their boss. But they kept their observations to good-natured grins and the occasional knowing wink among themselves. All approved of the change in Hunter, who seemed less harsh, more approachable since Violet's arrival. "Boss actually laughed yesterday when that new colt dumped him in the mud," Thomas remarked to Joey one evening as they sat outside the bunkhouse. "Year ago, he'd have cursed a blue streak and been in a foul mood for days. Miss Violet's good for him," Joey agreed, whittling a piece of wood. "Good for all of us, really. Man wasn't meant to live on burnt beans and tough biscuits, more than the cooking," Marcus chimed in. "She brings a light to the place, makes it feel like a home instead of just somewhere to hang our hats." The others nodded in agreement, raising their coffee cups in a silent toast to the woman who'd transformed their lives along with their meals. Inside the main house, unaware of their tribute, Violet was teaching Hunter to dance. It had begun innocently enough. Hunter mentioned that he'd been invited to a wedding in town the following month, grumbling about social obligations. "I don't suppose you know how to waltz?" Violet had asked teasingly. When Hunter admitted he didn't, she impulsively offered to teach him. Now they moved awkwardly around the cleared space in the main room, Violet counting softly, 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, as Hunter concentrated fiercely on his footwork. "I'm hopeless at this," he muttered after stepping on her toes for the third time. "Give me a wild horse to break any day over this dancing business." Violet laughed, the sound like music in the quiet house. "You're not hopeless, just overthinking it. Dancing is about feeling, not counting." She placed his hand more firmly on her waist. "Hold me like you mean it, Hunter." Something flared in his eyes at her words, and suddenly his grip tightened, drawing her closer. His movements became more confident as he stopped watching his feet and instead watched her face. They moved together more smoothly now, finding a natural rhythm without the counting. "That's it," Violet encouraged, slightly breathless from more than the dance. "You're a natural after all." They continued around the room once more, bodies drawing imperceptibly closer with each turn. When they finally stopped, neither pulled away immediately. Hunter's hand remained at her waist, and Violet's rested lightly on his shoulder. Their faces were inches apart, breath mingling in the quiet room. "Violet," Hunter murmured, his voice deeper than usual. His gaze dropped to her lips, and she felt herself sway toward him. The spell was broken by the sound of boots on the porch steps. They sprang apart just as Thomas opened the door, looking apologetic when he saw them. "Sorry to interrupt, boss, but we've got trouble with those new steers in the north pasture. Marcus says they've broken through the fence line." Hunter nodded, his expression shifting instantly to businesslike efficiency. "I'll saddle up. Tell Joey and Davy to meet me at the barn." As he grabbed his hat and gun belt, he paused briefly beside Violet. "Rain, check on that dancing lesson." "Of course," she said, trying to ignore the disappointment flooding through her. "Be careful." Hunter's eyes softened momentarily. "Always am," he assured her before striding out into the night. Violet pressed her hands to her flushed cheeks, heart still racing. What had almost happened? And what would she have done if Thomas hadn't interrupted? The questions haunted her as she prepared for bed, wondering if the moment had passed forever, or if there would be another chance to discover what lay beneath the surface of their growing friendship. The answer came 3 days later, in the most unexpected and terrifying way. Violet was alone at the ranch, the men having ridden out at dawn to move a herd to summer pasture. She was taking advantage of the quiet to do a thorough cleaning of the main house, windows open to the pleasant June breeze. The sound of an approaching horse drew her to the front window. A stylishly dressed man she didn't recognize was riding up to the house, his expensive mount and clothing marking him as a city dweller rather than a local. Something about his confident posture sent a chill of recognition through her even before he removed his hat, revealing the handsome features that had once captivated her. Gerald Blackwood had found her. Violet's first instinct was to hide, but it was too late. He'd already spotted her at the window. His smile, once charming to her innocent eyes, now seemed predatory. "Violet, my dear," he called out, dismounting with practiced grace. "What a pleasant surprise." She stepped onto the porch, keeping the door open behind her for a quick retreat if necessary. "How did you find me, Gerald?" she asked, proud that her voice remained steady despite her racing heart. Gerald ascended the steps, stopping when Violet took an instinctive step backward. "Oh, it wasn't difficult. San Francisco is full of people willing to share information for the right price. A woman matching your description, traveling alone to Sierra City. Then a few discreet inquiries in town led me here." His smile widened. "I must say I'm impressed by your resourcefulness." "A ranch cook, how rustic. What do you want?" Violet demanded, cutting through his false pleasantries. Gerald's expression hardened slightly. "Is that any way to greet your fiancé after such a long separation?" "Ex-fiancé," Violet corrected firmly. "You're engaged to someone else now." "I saw the announcement," a dismissive wave of his hand. "A business arrangement, nothing more. It can be easily broken." His eyes narrowed. "You embarrassed me, Violet, running away like a thief in the night. People talked." "You hurt me," she countered, repeatedly. "Did you expect me to stay and endure more?" Gerald stepped closer, and Violet could smell the expensive cologne that had once seemed so sophisticated to her. Now it turned her stomach. "I expected you to honor your commitments," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "I invested time in you, Violet. Resources, my reputation, I don't take such losses lightly." "I'm not a ledger entry, Gerald. I owe you nothing." Violet's hands were shaking now, but she clasped them tightly before her. "Please leave. This is private property." Gerald laughed, the sound utterly without humor. "Whose property exactly? I heard in town you're working for some rough frontiersman. Hunter Lawson, is it? Does he know who you really are, Violet, the daughter of a failed merchant who tried to elevate herself through an advantageous marriage?" "He knows everything that matters," Violet replied, lifting her chin defiantly. "Does he?" Gerald's eyes raked over her dismissively. "Does he know how willingly you accepted my gifts, how you played the devoted fiancé at social functions? How you led me to believe—" "I never led you to believe anything," Violet interrupted, anger overcoming fear. "You saw what you wanted to see, and when I didn't conform to your expectations, you turned violent." Gerald's face darkened. "You're coming back to San Francisco with me, Violet. We can do this the easy way, with you accepting my generous forgiveness." Or his hand moved toward his jacket, where Violet knew he often carried a small pistol. The unmistakable sound of a rifle being cocked froze them both. "I believe the lady asked you to leave," came Hunter's voice, hard as granite, from the edge of the porch. Gerald turned slowly, his hand moving away from his jacket. Hunter stood 10 feet away, rifle aimed steadily at Gerald's chest. Behind him, Thomas and Joey sat on horseback, hands resting meaningfully on their holstered pistols. "This is a private matter between my fiancé and myself," Gerald said smoothly, recovering his composure. "I don't believe it concerns you, Mr. Lawson." "Former fiancé," Hunter corrected, his eyes never leaving Gerald's face. "And everything that happens on my land concerns me, especially when it involves threatening a woman under my protection." Gerald assessed the situation, clearly realizing he was outmatched. "Violet and I have a history, Mr. Lawson, one that predates her. Employment here. I've come to escort her back to San Francisco where she belongs." "Seems to me she belongs wherever she chooses to be," Hunter replied evenly, "and she's chosen to be here." He glanced briefly at Violet. "That right?" "Yes," Violet confirmed, her voice stronger now with Hunter's reassuring presence. "I have no wish to return to San Francisco, Gerald. Not now, not ever." Gerald's pleasant mask slipped, revealing the anger beneath. Don't be foolish, Violet. What future do you imagine here? Playing housemaid to a cowboy and his ranch hands, you were raised for better things. Better things. Hunter's voice took on a dangerous edge. Like being beaten when you displeased him, living in fear, those the better things you're offering, Blackwood. Gerald's head snapped around to stare at Hunter. She's been telling tales, I see. Violet always did have a flair for the dramatic. She didn't have to tell me, Hunter growled. I saw the fear in her eyes the moment you rode up. That tells me everything I need to know about you. He nodded toward Gerald's horse. Now mount up and ride out while you still can. For a moment, Gerald seemed to consider defying the order. Then, with a cold smile, he turned back to Violet. This isn't over, my dear. A man like Lawson can't offer you the life you deserve. When you tire of playing frontier woman, you know where to find me. Get on your horse, Blackwood, Hunter ordered, patience visibly wearing thin. With exaggerated politeness, Gerald placed his hat back on his head and descended the porch steps. Good day, gentlemen, Violet. He mounted his horse with fluid grace, then added, I'll be staying at the Sierra City Hotel for a few days, should anyone wish to continue our conversation in more civilized surroundings. They watched in tense silence as he rode away, not lowering their guard until he was well down the road. Hunter was at Violet's side in an instant, rifle set aside. Are you all right? Did he hurt you? No, I'm fine, she assured him, though her legs felt suddenly weak. You came back early. Finished faster than expected, Hunter explained, his eyes still searching her face with concern. Thank God we did. He turned to his men. Thomas, ride into town and inform Sheriff Collins that Gerald Blackwood is not welcome on Lawson property. If he shows his face here again, we'll consider it trespassing and act accordingly. Thomas nodded grimly and rode off, while Joey took the horses to the barn, tactfully giving Hunter and Violet privacy. Once they were alone, Violet's composure crumbled. She began to shake, reaction setting in now that the immediate danger had passed. Hunter led her gently to a porch chair, kneeling beside her. He found me, she whispered, tears threatening. All this time I thought I was safe, but he found me. Hunter took her trembling hands in his. Listen to me, Violet, he won't touch you. I won't let him near you again. His eyes, usually so guarded, were fierce with protective determination. I should have killed him where he stood. No, Violet protested, squeezing his hands. That would have only brought more trouble. You handled it perfectly. She attempted a weak smile. My knight in dusty range clothes. Hunter's expression softened, and he reached up to brush a tear from her cheek with his thumb. I meant what I said. You belong wherever you choose to be. Their eyes locked, and Violet saw in his gaze everything he hadn't said concern, yes, but also something deeper, warmer, more personal than mere protection of an employee. I choose to be here, she said softly. With you. The admission hung between them for a heartbeat before Hunter leaned forward, closing the distance between them. His lips met hers in a kiss that began gently but quickly deepened as Violet responded, her hands coming up to frame his face. Unlike Gerald's calculated, controlling kisses, Hunter's was honest and seeking, asking rather than demanding. When they finally parted, both were breathing heavily. I've wanted to do that for weeks, Hunter confessed, his voice rough with emotion. I've wanted you to, Violet replied with a small smile. I was beginning to think you never would. Hunter stood, drawing her up with him and into his arms. I didn't think I had the right, he admitted. You've been through so much, and I'm your employer, and Violet silenced him with another kiss, more confident this time. I think we're well past employer and employee, don't you? A slow smile spread across Hunter's face, transforming his usually stern features. I reckon we are at that. His expression grew serious again. But Blackwood, he's still a threat. He won't give up easily. I know, Violet sighed. Gerald has always been possessive and vindictive. Being publicly jilted will have wounded his pride deeply. Then we'll deal with him together, Hunter promised. I protect what's mine, Violet. The possessive note in his voice sent a pleasurable shiver through her. Am I yours, Hunter Lawson? She asked, tilting her head to study his face. His arms tightened around her. If you want to be, he said, a rare vulnerability in his eyes. Because I'm pretty sure I've been yours since the day you fainted into my arms on Sierra City's Main Street, Violet laughed softly, joy bubbling up despite the lingering threat of Gerald's presence. That wasn't exactly my most dignified moment. It was the moment everything changed for me, Hunter said simply. I just didn't realize it at the time. Their third kiss was a promise, sealed in the golden afternoon light on the porch of what Violet now truly felt was home. Gerald Blackwood was not a man accustomed to defeat. Over the next 3 days, he made his presence felt throughout Sierra City, asking questions about Hunter Lawson and his ranch, ingratiating himself with local merchants, and spinning tales of his confused fiancée who had suffered a nervous episode and fled San Francisco in a state of delusion. Some townsfolk were swayed by his charm and apparent concern. Others, who had come to know and respect Violet during her brief time in town, were more skeptical. Dr. Parker, in particular, rebuffed Gerald's attempts to gain information, remembering all too well the half-starved woman who had fainted from hunger on his examination table. At the ranch, Hunter took no chances. Violet was never left alone with either Hunter himself or one of the trusted hands always within calling distance. Sheriff Collins, a grizzled veteran of frontier law enforcement, rode out to take statements and warned Hunter to avoid vigilante justice, no matter the provocation. Man like Blackwood has connections, the sheriff cautioned. You shoot him, even if justified, and you could face serious legal trouble. I understand, Hunter replied, though the hard set of his jaw suggested he considered it a price worth paying if it came to Violet's safety. Despite the tension, these days also deepened the bond between Hunter and Violet. With their feelings finally acknowledged, they found moments of sweetness amidst the worry-shared glances across the dinner table, stolen kisses in the kitchen, quiet conversations that now included whispered words of affection. On the 4th day after Gerald's unwelcome appearance, Hunter found Violet in the kitchen garden, harvesting fresh vegetables for dinner. The morning sun illuminated her auburn hair, creating a halo effect that made his breath catch. "Marry me," he said without preamble. Violet looked up in surprise, a basket of tomatoes in her hands. "What?" Hunter crossed the garden to her, taking the basket and setting it aside before capturing her hands in his. "Marry me," he repeated. "I know it's sudden and maybe not the most romantic timing, but yes," Violet interrupted, her eyes shining. "Yes, I'll marry you." Hunter stared at her, momentarily stunned by her immediate acceptance. "You're sure?" "I'm not exactly what most women dream of, rough-mannered, work-hardened, set in my ways." Violet silenced him with a finger to his lips. "You're exactly what I dream of, Hunter Lawson. Honest, honorable, kind beneath that stern exterior." She smiled mischievously. "And quite handsome, which doesn't hurt." Hunter laughed, a free, joyous sound rarely heard from him before Violet entered his life. He lifted her off her feet in an exuberant embrace, spinning her around among the vegetable plants. "Hunter," she protested laughingly, "you're crushing the beans." He set her down but kept his arms around her. "To hell with the beans," he growled before kissing her soundly. When they parted, Violet's expression grew more serious. "What about Gerald? He'll be furious when he learns of our engagement." "Let him be," Hunter said firmly. "A marriage license makes you legally mine in the eyes of the law. Even Blackwood's connections can't override that." Violet nodded, seeing the practical wisdom in his suggestion. "How soon can we make it official?" "I'll ride into town today, speak with the minister." "If you're willing, we could be married by the end of the week." Hunter searched her face. "Unless you want more time, a proper wedding with all the trimmings." Violet thought of her parents, gone these 3 years, of friends left behind in San Francisco, of her solitary journey to this unexpected happiness. "Just us and your men and perhaps Dr. Parker and Mrs. Whitaker," she decided. "Those are all the trimmings I need." Hunter's smile was tender as he brushed a strand of hair from her face. "Then that's what we'll have, a simple ceremony followed by a lifetime together." "It sounds perfect," Violet agreed, sealing the plan with another kiss. That afternoon, Hunter rode into Sierra City to make arrangements with the minister and purchase a simple gold band from the jeweler. He was returning to his horse, whistling softly with satisfaction, when a familiar voice stopped him. "Mr. Lawson." "A word, if you please." Hunter turned to find Gerald Blackwood leaning against the hitching post, elegantly dressed despite the frontier setting and looking utterly out of place. "I've got nothing to say to you, Blackwood," Hunter replied coldly, continuing toward his horse. Gerald fell into step beside him. "I think you'll want to hear this. It concerns Violet's financial situation." Hunter stopped, eyeing Gerald with suspicion. "What about it? Did she tell you why she agreed to marry me in the first place?" Gerald asked, his tone conversational. When Hunter didn't respond, he continued. "Her father left substantial debts when he died, debts I generously agreed to settle in exchange for her hand." "If you're implying Violet was with you for money—" "Not at all," Gerald interrupted smoothly. "Merely pointing out that she had few options at the time, just as she has few now." He examined his manicured nails casually. Unless, of course, someone were to offer her a better alternative. Hunter's hand itched to reach for his gun, but they were in the middle of Sierra City's Main Street with witnesses aplenty. "State your business plainly, Blackwood." Gerald smiled thinly. "Very well. I'm prepared to offer Violet a generous settlement enough to establish herself independently wherever she chooses. All she has to do is return to San Francisco long enough to sign the necessary papers." Hunter's eyes narrowed. "And why would you make such an offer?" "Let's call it compensation for emotional distress," Gerald replied. "Violet clearly believes I mistreated her. While I dispute her interpretation of events, I'm willing to make amends financially to avoid any unseemly public discussions of our private affairs." "You're afraid she'll talk," Hunter realized. "That she'll tell others what you did to her, and it'll damage your precious reputation." Gerald's smile tightened. "I'm offering her freedom, Lawson, financial independence. Isn't that what every woman ultimately wants?" "What Violet wants," Hunter said deliberately, "is what she already has: safety, respect, and a future with someone who values her for more than her appearance or social connections." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "She's going to be my wife, Blackwood. By the end of this week, she'll be Mrs. Hunter Lawson, and there's not a damn thing you or your money can do about it." Rage flashed across Gerald's handsome features before he controlled it. "I see. Well, please extend my congratulations to the bride. I do hope she knows what she's giving up: culture, society, comfort for a life of frontier drudgery." "She knows exactly what she's choosing," Hunter replied confidently. "And who?" Gerald straightened his jacket. "We'll see. My offer remains open until I leave town tomorrow afternoon. Perhaps Violet might appreciate being consulted before you make decisions about her future." He tipped his hat mockingly. "Good day, Mr. Lawson." Hunter watched him walk away, anger simmering beneath his calm exterior. Gerald Blackwood was a snake, charming on the surface but venomous at heart. Hunter didn't trust this sudden offer of financial settlement any more than he'd trust a rattler not to strike. Still, he wondered briefly if he should mention it to Violet. Would she be tempted by financial independence after years of uncertainty? The thought troubled him as he mounted his horse and headed back to the ranch. Violet was waiting on the porch when he returned, her face lighting up at the sight of him. Any doubts Hunter harbored dissolved instantly. This was where she wanted to be. She'd said so herself. Gerald Blackwood was the past. He, Hunter, was her future. "Everything's arranged," he told her as he dismounted. "Minister Wilson can perform the ceremony on Saturday morning. If that suits you." "It's perfect," Violet assured him, coming down the steps to meet him. "Mrs. Whitaker was here while you were gone. She's insisting on making me a new dress for the occasion." Hunter smiled, drawing her into his arms. "You'd look beautiful in a flour sack, but I won't object to seeing you in something fancy." Violet laughed, then studied his face more closely. "Did something happen in town? You seem preoccupied." Hunter hesitated, then decided honesty was the foundation on which their life together would be built. "I ran into Blackwood," he admitted, then briefly outlined Gerald's offer of a financial settlement. To his relief, Violet's response was immediate and unequivocal. "It's a trap," she said firmly. "Gerald never gives anything without expecting something greater in return. He's trying to get me alone in San Francisco, away from your protection." Hunter nodded, having reached the same conclusion. "That was my thinking, but I wanted you to know, it's your decision to make." Violet's eyes softened at his words. "Thank you for respecting me enough to tell me, But I don't need Gerald's money, not when it comes with invisible strings attached. She twined her arms around Hunter's neck. All I need is right here. The certainty in her voice banished the last of Hunter's concerns. He bent to kiss her, a kiss full of promise and passion, interrupted only by a discreet cough from Thomas, who'd appeared around the corner of the house. "Sorry, boss," the foreman said, unsuccessfully hiding a grin. "But Joey's managed to get himself stuck in that old well we were supposed to be filling in. Might need some help getting him out." Hunter sighed, pressing his forehead briefly to Violet's. "Duty calls, we'll continue this discussion later." "I'll hold you to that, Mr. Lawson," Violet teased, her eyes dancing with happiness despite the morning's revelations. As Hunter strode off with Thomas, Violet returned to her kitchen preparations with a light heart. Gerald's attempt to lure her away had failed completely. In 3 days' time, she would be Mrs. Hunter Lawson, and Gerald Blackwood would be nothing but a painful memory, or so she believed. The morning of the wedding dawned clear and bright, with the kind of perfect blue sky that seemed a divine blessing on the day's events. Violet awoke in her cabin, momentarily disoriented by the knowledge that this was her last morning as Violet Barrymore. By noon, she would be Violet Lawson, wife of the man who had saved her in more ways than one, Mrs. Whittaker arrived early to help her prepare, bringing the completed wedding dress, a simple but elegant creation of pale blue silk that matched Violet's eyes perfectly. "It was my daughter's," Mrs. Whittaker explained as she helped Violet into the garment. She wore it for her own wedding before moving east with her husband, been saving it for a special occasion, and I can't think of one more special than this. Violet turned to embrace the older woman, tears threatening to spill. "I can't thank you enough, it's beautiful." "Pshaw, Mrs. Whittaker said gruffly, though her own eyes were suspiciously bright. "Just doing my part to make sure Hunter Lawson finally gets himself a proper wife. Man's been alone too long." She stepped back to assess her handiwork. "There now, you're a vision, my dear, that Cowboy won't know what hit him." Meanwhile, in the main house, Hunter was enduring good-natured ribbing from his ranch hands as he struggled with his best shirt and string tie. "Never thought I'd see the day," Marcus chuckled, watching Hunter's fumbling attempts. "The boss tamed at last." "Ain't taming if you go willingly," Thomas pointed out, coming to Hunter's rescue with the tie. "More like finding home." Hunter shot his foreman a grateful look, both for the assistance and the sentiment. "Exactly right," he agreed. "Though if any of you suggest I've gone soft, you'll be mucking stalls for a month." The men laughed, knowing the threat was empty. Hunter Lawson had indeed softened since Violet's arrival, but only in ways that mattered. He was still the most capable, decisive ranch owner in the county, respected and even feared by those who crossed him. Just as Hunter finished dressing, a commotion outside drew their attention. Joey burst through the door, his young face alarmed. "Boss, riders coming, 5 of them, moving fast. One looks like that Blackwood fella and the others ain't locals." Hunter's expression darkened instantly. "Armed?" Joey nodded. "To the teeth." Without hesitation, Hunter reached for his gun belt. "Thomas, get to Violet's cabin. Keep her inside and safe. Marcus, Joey, Davy, grab rifles and take positions. I'll deal with Blackwood." As the men scattered to their assignments, Hunter stepped onto the porch, gun at his side but ready. Gerald Blackwood and 4 rough-looking men reined in their horses in the yard, dust settling around them in the morning sunlight. "Blackwood," Hunter acknowledged coldly. "You're trespassing." Gerald dismounted smoothly, his usual elegant attire replaced by practical riding clothes. "Not for long, Lawson. I've come for what's mine." "Nothing here belongs to you," Hunter replied, eyes flicking briefly to assess the 4 men still mounted. Hired guns, by the look of them hard-faced and watchful. Gerald's smile was unpleasant. "Violet belongs with me. I've been patient, offered reasonable terms, but my patience is exhausted." He gestured toward Violet's cabin. "She's coming with me today, Lawson. The only question is whether you'll be alive to see her go." Hunter's hand tightened on his gun. "You really want to do this, Blackwood?" 5-to-1 odds might seem favorable, but I guarantee at least 2 of you won't ride away from here. 3-to-1, came Thomas's voice as he emerged from behind the barn, rifle aimed steadily at the mounted men. "And I'd lower those odds further if I were you." From the bunkhouse window, Joey's rifle barrel appeared, followed by Marcus positioning himself near the corral, his own weapon trained on the intruders. Gerald's confidence wavered visibly. "You're making a mistake, all of you. I have connections that could make life very difficult." "Enough, Gerald." All heads turned to see Violet standing on the path from her cabin, still wearing her wedding dress, her expression a mixture of anger and determination. "Violet, get back inside," Hunter ordered, alarmed to see her exposed. She ignored him, moving forward until she stood beside Hunter on the porch. "I'm not hiding anymore, not from him." She fixed Gerald with a steady gaze. "This ends now. I am not yours. I never truly was. I'm exactly where I choose to be, with the man I choose to love." Gerald's handsome face contorted with rage. "You ungrateful." He reached inside his jacket, and Hunter's gun was instantly in his hand, cocked and aimed. "Don't," Hunter warned, voice deadly quiet. "Give me a reason, Blackwood. Please." For a tense moment, it seemed Gerald might actually draw his weapon. Then, slowly, he lowered his hand. "This isn't over," he snarled. "You think you're safe here in your little frontier kingdom, but you're not. I'll be watching, waiting. And when the time comes—" "The time has come already," interrupted yet another voice. Sheriff Collins rode into the yard, accompanied by 2 deputies. "Mr. Blackwood, I believe I warned you about trespassing on Lawson property." Gerald spun to face the new arrival. "Sheriff, I'm merely attempting to recover my fiancée, who is clearly being held against her will." "Is that so, Miss Barrymore?" the sheriff asked, looking to Violet. "It is absolutely not so," Violet replied firmly. "I broke my engagement to Mr. Blackwood months ago, left San Francisco of my own free will, and am about to marry Mr. Lawson also of my own free will. Gerald has no claim on me whatsoever." Sheriff Collins nodded, seeming unsurprised. "That's what I figured. Now, Mr. Blackwood, I suggest you and your friends turn around and head back to town. The stagecoach leaves for Sacramento at noon. I expect you to be on it." Gerald looked from the sheriff to Hunter to Violet, clearly calculating his options and finding them limited. Finally, with cold dignity, he remounted his horse. "This isn't the end," he promised Violet. "One day you'll regret this choice." "The only thing I regret," Violet replied evenly, "is not having the courage to leave you sooner." With a final venomous glare, Gerald wheeled his horse around and galloped away, his hired men following close behind. Sheriff Collins watched them go, then turned back to Hunter and Violet with a grin. "Perfect timing, wouldn't you say? Heard in town you two were getting hitched today. Thought I'd ride out early to offer my congratulations, lucky thing I did." Hunter holstered his gun, tension draining from his shoulders. "Lucky indeed, Sheriff. We're much obliged. Don't mention it." The sheriff tipped his hat to Violet. "Miss Barrymore, you look lovely. I'd be honored to stay for the ceremony if that's all right with you folks." "We'd be delighted," Violet assured him, her smile returning now that the danger had passed. She turned to Hunter, reaching for his hand. "Shall we continue with our plans, Mr. Lawson? I believe we have a wedding to attend." Hunter's eyes softened as he looked down at her, marveling at her resilience. "Nothing I'd rather do, Miss Barrymore. Nothing in this world." 2 hours later, in the main room of the ranch house, transformed with wildflowers and ribbons by Mrs. Whitaker's skilled hands, Minister Wilson pronounced Hunter and Violet husband and wife. Their kiss, witnessed by the ranch hands, Dr. Parker, Mrs. Whitaker, Sheriff Collins and his deputies, sealed a union forged through hardship and strengthened by love. The celebration that followed was simple but joyous. Thomas had secretly arranged for a fiddler from town to provide music, and the main room was cleared for dancing. Hunter, putting his recent lessons to good use, waltzed with his new bride to the approving smiles of their guests. "Mrs. Lawson," he murmured as they moved together, far more gracefully than during their practice sessions, "has a nice ring to it." "It does indeed, Mr. Lawson," Violet agreed, her eyes shining with happiness, "though I'm still getting used to it." "We have a lifetime for that," Hunter promised, drawing her closer. "A lifetime of moments just like this one." As the celebration continued around them, neither could imagine just how true those words would prove to be. The days following the wedding settled into a new rhythm for the newlyweds. Violet moved her belongings into the main house. though they kept the cabin ready for guests. The ranch hands respectfully gave them privacy in the evenings, retreating to the bunkhouse earlier than usual with knowing grins that made Violet blush and Hunter growl mock threats. True to Sheriff Collins's report, Gerald Blackwood had departed on the noon stage, presumably returning to San Francisco and his arranged marriage. Though Violet occasionally startled at unexpected sounds or the sight of unfamiliar riders approaching the ranch, the fear of Gerald's return gradually faded as summer progressed into autumn. Hunter proved to be a devoted, if sometimes awkwardly demonstrative, husband. Unused to expressing affection openly, he often found himself at a loss for words. Instead, he showed his love through actions, bringing Violet wildflowers he'd spotted while riding the range, carving a rocking chair for the porch where they could sit together in the evenings, teaching her to ride so she could accompany him on short trips around the property. For her part, Violet blossomed in the security of Hunter's love and the freedom of ranch life. Her cooking, always excellent, became inspired as she experimented with new recipes that made the ranch hands declare themselves the best-fed cowboys in California. She transformed the main house with small touches: curtains at the windows, cushions on the hard wooden chairs, books and small treasures arranged on once bare shelves. As October painted the surrounding hills with golden aspen leaves, Violet discovered she was expecting their first child. The news, shared first with Hunter one crisp evening as they sat before the fireplace, filled him with a mixture of joy and terror. "A baby," he repeated, staring at her in wonder. "Our baby," Violet laughed at his expression. "Yes, husband. That's generally what happens when two people love each other as we do." Hunter placed a gentle hand on her still flat stomach. Is it safe? After everything your body's been through," Violet covered his hand with her own. "Dr. Parker says I'm perfectly healthy now. The baby should arrive in late spring, April or May, he thinks." "I know nothing about babies," Hunter admitted, a rare note of vulnerability in his voice. "Neither do I," Violet confessed, "but we'll learn together." Hunter gathered her into his arms, his expression solemn. "I promise you this, Violet Lawson, our child will never know hunger or fear or doubt. This ranch, everything I've built, it's all for you and for him. Or her," he added with a smile. "I know," Violet said simply, trusting completely in the man who had caught her when she fell and had been her strength ever since. The news of the coming baby spread quickly among the ranch hands, who took it upon themselves to become unofficial uncles to the unborn Lawson heir. Joey carved a tiny wooden horse as his first gift to the baby, while Thomas began planning expansions to the main house to accommodate the growing family. Even Mrs. Whitaker increased her visits to the ranch, bringing patterns for baby clothes and offering advice from her experience as a mother and grandmother. Winter descended on the Sierra Nevada with a vengeance that year. Heavy snows isolated the ranch for days at a time, but the Lawsons and their extended family of workers were well prepared. The root cellar was stocked with preserved vegetables from Violet's garden, the smokehouse filled with cured meats, and the barn bursting with hay for the livestock. These snowbound days created a special intimacy between Hunter and Violet. Long evenings were spent reading aloud by the fire, playing chess, Violet usually won, or simply talking about their hopes for the future and the child they would welcome in the spring. One such evening, as wind howled around the sturdy log house and snow piled against the windows, Hunter found Violet standing at the bedroom window, her hands resting on her now visible pregnancy. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, coming to stand behind her and wrapping his arms around her expanding waistline. "How different my life is now from what I expected," she replied, leaning back against his solid warmth. "A year ago, I was trapped in a gilded cage in San Francisco, afraid of my future. Now I'm here, miles from anywhere, in the middle of a blizzard, and I've never felt safer or more content." Hunter kissed the top of her head. "Any regrets about giving up city life, fine dresses, theaters, all that?" Violet turned in his arms to face him. "Not one," she said firmly. "Those things mean nothing without love and respect. You've given me both, along with a home and a purpose." She smiled, guiding his hand to where the baby had just kicked. And this, a family of my own. The wonder on Hunter's face as he felt his child move never failed to melt Violet's heart. This harsh cowboy, feared by outlaws and respected by hardened ranch hands, could be rendered speechless by the simple movement of his unborn child. "I love you, Violet Lawson," he said, the words coming more easily to him now after months of marriage. "More than I ever thought possible." "And I love you," she replied, standing on tiptoe to kiss him. "My unexpected hero." Spring arrived late but gloriously in 1873, the snow finally retreating to reveal tender green shoots and wildflowers dotting the meadows. Violet, now in her final month of pregnancy, moved more slowly but insisted on maintaining her duties as much as possible, though the ranch hands conspired to lighten her workload whenever they could. Hunter became increasingly protective, rarely straying far from the main house despite the demands of spring calving and fence repairs. When he did need to ride out, Thomas was assigned to remain within shouting distance of the house, much to Violet's amused exasperation. "I'm pregnant, not made of glass," she protested one morning as Hunter hesitated before leaving to check on a distant herd. "Humor me," he requested, kissing her goodbye. First-time father's prerogative, Violet relented, touched by his concern. In truth, she found his protective instincts endearing, so different from Gerald's controlling behavior that had masqueraded as care. On May 10, 1873, after a labor that lasted through the night and into the morning, Violet gave birth to a healthy boy they named James Hunter Lawson. Hunter, who had refused to leave her side despite Dr. Parker's suggestions, was the first to hold his son after the doctor cleaned and swaddled him. "He's perfect," Hunter whispered, awe evident in his voice as he carefully returned the tiny bundle to Violet's arms, just like his mother. Violet, exhausted but radiant, smiled up at her husband. "He has your chin, and I think he'll have your eyes. They're already changing from newborn blue." Hunter sat carefully on the edge of the bed, one arm around Violet, the other hand gently touching his son's downy head. "Thank you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "For him, for everything." The family of three spent the day in peaceful seclusion, Hunter turning away all visitors except Dr. Parker with uncharacteristic firmness. "Tomorrow," he promised the curious, excited ranch hands. "You can all meet him tomorrow." That evening, as twilight painted the sky in shades of pink and gold, Hunter stood at the bedroom window with little James cradled against his chest. Violet watched from the bed, her heart full to bursting with love for these two males who had become her entire world. "What are you telling him?" she asked softly, noticing Hunter's lips moving as he whispered to their son. Hunter turned, a hint of embarrassment crossing his face. "Just welcoming him to Lawson Ranch," he said, "promising him it will be his someday if he wants it." He carried the baby back to Violet, and telling him how lucky he is to have you for a mother. As she took their son into her arms, Violet marveled at the journey that had brought her to this moment of perfect happiness. From starvation and desperation on the streets of Sierra City to this a loving husband, a beautiful child, a home filled with warmth and security. "Do you ever think about that day?" she asked Hunter as he settled beside her on the bed. "When I fainted in the street and you caught me," Hunter nodded, his fingers gently stroking James's tiny hand. "Often. I remember how little you weighed, how fragile you seemed, and how determined even then." He met her eyes. "I had no idea that moment would change my entire life." "Mine too," Violet agreed, leaning against his shoulder. "Though I think perhaps we were always meant to find each other." Hunter smiled, the expression now coming naturally to a face once set in perpetual sternness. "I'm not usually one for fate or destiny," he admitted, "but in our case, I might make an exception." Outside their window, the first star appeared in the deepening blue of the evening sky. Inside, the Lawson family, born of chance, hardship, and ultimately love, began their first night together, safe in the knowledge that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them united. And far away in San Francisco, in an elegant townhouse overlooking the bay, Gerald Blackwood raised a glass in a bitter, solitary toast. "To Violet," he murmured, eyes cold with thwarted possession. "We will meet again. but that is a story for another time. 5 years passed in what seemed to Violet like the blink of an eye. Lawson Ranch prospered under Hunter's capable management, expanding to include additional grazing lands and a growing herd of prized horses. The main house had been enlarged to accommodate their growing family. James, now an active 5-year-old, had been joined by a sister, Elizabeth Rose, aged 3, and another brother, William Thomas, just celebrating his first birthday. Violet, at 26, had blossomed into a confident woman far removed from the desperate, starving girl who had once fainted on Sierra City's Main Street. Her kitchen garden had expanded into a productive vegetable plot that supplied the ranch year-round, and her reputation as a hostess spread throughout the county. The Lawson Ranch Harvest Festival had become an annual event, drawing neighbors from miles around for a day of feasting, music, and community celebration. Hunter, approaching his 40th year, wore his responsibilities lightly now. The harsh lines of his face had softened, particularly around his eyes, which crinkled frequently with laughter, usually at the antics of his children, whom he adored without reservation. Though still respected and occasionally feared in business matters, those who knew him well recognized the profound change wrought by love and family. Sierra City had grown as well, the rough mining town gradually transforming into a more established community with a proper school, a small bank, and even a ladies' social club of which Violet was a founding member. The railroad now passed 20 miles to the south, bringing improved commerce and more frequent mail, including, at last, news that Gerald Blackwood had married his banker's daughter and reportedly departed for Europe on an extended tour. On this particular autumn day, with the mountains aflame with fall colors, the Lawsons were preparing to celebrate their 5th wedding anniversary with a small party for close friends. Violet stood on the front porch, watching James and Elizabeth playing with their wooden horses in the yard, while William napped inside under Mrs. Whittaker's watchful eye. "Penny for your thoughts," came Hunter's voice as he approached from the barn, his tall figure still as imposing as the day they'd met. Though gray now liberally streaked his dark hair, Violet smiled, reaching for his hand as he joined her on the porch. "I was just thinking how full my life is now," she said. "How rich in all the ways that truly matter." Hunter's arm slipped around her waist, drawing her against his side. "Any regrets?" He asked, the question both teasing and sincere, a variation on a conversation they'd had many times over the years. "Not one," she assured him, resting her head on his shoulder. "Except perhaps." Hunter looked down at her, one eyebrow raised. "Except," Violet's eyes danced with mischief. "Except that Mrs. Jenkins' daughter is still trying to set you up with her cousin from Sacramento. Apparently, she hasn't noticed the wedding ring or the 3 children." Hunter laughed, the sound rumbling through his chest. "Some women have no respect for a man's married state," he said with mock gravity. "I suppose I'll have to be more obvious about my complete devotion to my wife." "I suppose you will," Violet agreed, turning in his arms to face him. "Starting now would be advisable." Hunter obliged with a kiss that, even after 5 years of marriage, still made Violet's heart race. They were interrupted by the sound of small boots running up the porch steps. "Papa, Mama, Uncle Thomas says the cake is ready, and Joey's brought the fiddle," James announced, his blue eyes so like Hunter's alight with excitement. "Then we'd better not keep them waiting," Hunter replied, swinging his son up onto his shoulders. "Lead the way, Cowboy." As they moved toward the gathering at the back of the house, where tables had been set with Violet's best linens and decorated with autumn leaves and late-blooming wildflowers, Violet felt a familiar rush of gratitude. This life, these people were her true wealth, her real security. Later that evening, after their guests had departed and the children were tucked into bed, Hunter and Violet sat together on their porch, wrapped in a blanket against the autumn chill. The mountains loomed dark against a star-filled sky, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote called to its mate. "Happy anniversary, Mrs. Lawson," Hunter said quietly, raising their entwined hands to kiss her knuckles. "These have been the best 5 years of my life." "And mine," Violet agreed, "though I believe the next 5 will be even better." Hunter smiled, the expression visible even in the dim light of the porch lantern. What makes you so sure of that? Violet's free hand moved to rest on her stomach. Call it a mother's intuition. Hunter went still beside her, then slowly turned to face her fully. Violet, are you saying? She nodded, her smile radiant. Dr. Parker confirmed it yesterday. We'll welcome another Lawson in late spring. With a whoop that surely woke the ranch hands in the bunkhouse, Hunter lifted Violet from her seat and spun her around, mindful of her condition but unable to contain his joy. Another baby. God, Violet, you make me the happiest man alive. Settling her back on her feet but keeping his arms around her, Hunter marveled at the turn his life had taken. From solitary, hard-edged rancher to husband and father of soon-to-be four all, because he'd happened to be in the right place at the right time to catch a fainting woman on a dusty street. I love you, Violet Lawson, he said, the words still fresh after countless repetitions. More tomorrow than today, and even more the day after that. And I love you, Hunter Lawson, she replied, the promise in her voice as certain as the stars above. Today and all our tomorrows. In the warm glow of the porch light, they sealed that promise with a kiss that spoke of a love born in desperate circumstances, but nurtured into something unbreakable, a love that had transformed them both from strangers into family, from broken to whole, from alone to forever connected. And in the years that followed, as their family grew and the ranch flourished, Hunter and Violet Lawson remained each other's greatest strength and deepest joy, their love a testament to the power of one moment, one act of kindness, to change the course of two lives forever.